asked me if I'd share this story tonight, and it's probably not coincidental, but it's been 3 years ago this month when I started actually experiencing the symptoms that started us on this journey. And the first symptoms appeared. I would come home from work and I would hop on my bike and I'd go ride 20 miles. I'd ride out to Irwin Park out here and come back. And one night I just got this cough, and I thought, well, it's springtime, it's just allergies, and I passed it off as that. But the cough kept getting worse, and then a few weeks later I had a really bad coughing fit early in the morning at work, so I called the Baylor clinic there on TI Boulevard and said, can I come over and get looked at? And went over, and the doctor listened to me. He said, well, you have an upper respiratory infection, and gave me antibiotics. And it got better for a couple of weeks, and we actually took Mom over to Atlanta for vacation and came back, and suddenly my cough got worse over the weekend. So I went to see the family doctor here in McKinney. He did x-rays, said, well, you have pneumonia. So here's the antibiotics for the pneumonia. And got better for a couple of weeks, but came back, and I had a follow-up appointment with him on the 1st of July 5th actually. And he had another set of x-rays, and he said, well, this is not good, you still have pneumonia. So he sent me to see the pulmonologist, and they did a CT scan. A couple of weeks later we had the first CT scan. And he called me on Friday afternoon and said, well, there's at least one tumor, possibly two in your right lung. We can't really tell, but we need to do a biopsy of them. And so we scheduled that for the following Wednesday. Now that Sunday morning we went to church, and Shane and I went into the sanctuary and sat down, and I was looking at the order of service and get down to Chuck's message. And so the message that Sunday was, healed of a lengthy affliction.
Oh, wow.
I went, oh, okay. And now you may think I'm nuts here, but anyway, I heard this voice say, this will be a long, hard road, but you will be healed. And I looked at Shane and I said, what'd you say? And Shane just gave me this, I said, nothing look. Okay. So we just kind of went on. And that's when I first realized that I had cancer. I just realized, like, oh, I have cancer. That next week we did the first biopsy, and on Friday afternoon the doctor called and said, well, unfortunately we couldn't get enough tissue because your lungs already collapsed, but what we were able to sample comes back as suspicious for cancer. We need to do a fine needle biopsy this next week to determine what kind of cancer it is. So the next week we did the fine needle biopsy, and he called me back on Friday and said, it's non-small cell lung cancer, adenocarcinoma. Why don't you come in Monday? We'll set up an appointment for Monday afternoon and come in and talk about your options as far as treatment. And I just remember that Friday night just praying that God would put the right people in the right place at the right time, that I would be healed, and that above all else that it wouldn't be wasted, that some good somewhere would come out of it. And so that Monday we met with the doctor. Well, actually over the weekend we discussed whether we had to do treatment here or go to MD Anderson. And one of the neighbors came by and was talking to Dwayne out the front yard, and we didn't know it, but he had bladder cancer several years ago. And he said a good friend of his said, if you've got the best research facility within 4 hours, why wouldn't you go there? And we said, it makes sense. So, we'd already decided to go to the MD Anderson at that point. We went and saw the pulmonologist on Monday afternoon, and he said, I'll tell you, you should not have this. This makes no sense why you have this. But if it was me, I'd go to MD Anderson. He says, you could be treated here locally if you want to do that, but I'd go to MD Anderson. And he says, but one thing you have to consider is, I know you have children, and it's important that your family be involved. I said, well, they're at College Station, so Houston's closer than home anyhow, so we'll go to MD Anderson. He says, okay, we'll work on the referral for that. He says, but I'll tell you, he says, you're in for a long, hard road. I've heard that before. And anyway, so they went to work trying to get me down to MD Anderson, and they're finally able to schedule it. There was some mix-up in the paperwork, but when they finally called to tell me when my appointment was, the woman I was talking to, she says, boy, that's some nurse at that doctor's office. And I said, why? What's new? She says, she has been calling me every hour today to make sure I was scheduling your appointments. And when I told her not yet, finally the last time, she says, I'm not hanging up until you tell me when his appointment is. So there was a right person right there, right? But anyway, the mid-August, we went down there for the first set of appointments. And the night before I went in for my scans, again, you may think I'm nuts, but I woke up early in the morning, and the hotel we were in, we had living room and kitchenette area, and then the bedroom and bathroom area. And it was early in the morning, I woke up, and I wasn't totally awake yet, but I was, kind of in that phase-like state. And I can remember looking at the door that separated and I realized that there was a man in the doorway. And he had a very defensive posture about him. And he looked at me, and I looked at him, and he walked across the room and put his hand on my chest. And I sat up in bed. It was that real that somebody had touched me. And I sat up in bed, and I started looking around the hotel room thinking, why is this person in here? And I realized, like, oh, wait a minute. Guardian angel maybe? I don't know, but just kind of went with us. And, I know in the Bible it says God sends your angels to watch over you, or sends his angels to watch over you. And so I just, believe that was one of my guardian angels that was looking after me. And so the next day we went through, I had all the PET scans, CT scans, bone scans, about every kind of scans you could come up with. And we came home not knowing what all they'd found. Because that was on a Friday, so the next week we went back and found out that it was a stage 4 lung cancer. That they found different lymph nodes in my chest that were already affected, and a 3mm brain tumor that they had found. So we met with the brain surgeons and all, and they said, well, your brain tumor is only 3mm. We've never treated one that small. We may have to let it grow and then treat it. I'm not real impressed with that idea. And they said, well, what we'll do is we'll set you up an appointment and to do it. And if you don't hear from us, show up at this place at that time. So, okay, and he was very, he emphasized that if I started regular chemo, I would not be able to have the gamma knife surgery that they're scheduling for me, because it would increase the chance of bleeding in the brain. So we met with the oncologist, and he was said, we need to get you started on some form of chemo. And this was Labor Day. He says, I really think you have a mutation known as EGFR, and he had written at the time 80-some papers on EGFR mutations and lab studies and stuff, and he was pretty emphatic that was what it was, and he wanted me to start on Tarceva. Well, we go to the pharmacy to pick it up, and they said, well, your insurance company won't approve the Tarceva. I said, why not? I said, well, because they're saying your pathology reports aren't back yet, and they have to have that before, since it's a targeted therapy. And that was, probably a real discouraging point, because I was like, well, he wants me on this. We don't know what to do. But we came home Labor Day weekend, and some friends came over to see us on Saturday that I work with, and one of them says, well, why don't you call, and I can't remember her name, but it's the head of HR at TI.
Darla?
Darla. I worked with her 20 years ago up in Sherman. I'm like, I don't really know if I should call the director of HR. I didn't seem like it. But that was on Saturday, and Sunday morning we go to church, and Chuck Swindoll preaches on David and Goliath and taking on the giants in your life. Like, well, okay, I guess I'm sending an email to Darla. Came home and sent an email to Darla, explained to her what was going on, and said, what are the options? And we put a thing on my Carrying Bridge site about the drug company not approving it, and the senior VP that I used to work for was following the Carrying Bridge. Anyway, I go to work. I get a message back from Darla, says, okay, we'll look at it. Well, I go to work on Tuesday morning, and at 9 o'clock my phone starts ringing for all the people at HR at TI, because Darla had sent a message to the person who coordinates with CVS Pharmacy, the drug, or she said, fix this, basically. So I get a call from the TI director, says, we're going to take care of this, don't worry about it, you got enough to worry about it. 30 minutes later, I get a call from the director at CVS, says, this should not have happened, we're very sorry, you're approved for 30 days. So that got me started on a medicine, which we found out 2 weeks later was not the right medicine, but at least it was, you know, something so that we could actually do the Gamma knife, which was in 2 weeks. And so go back down to MD Anderson, and the night, or the day before I'm scheduled to do the Gamma knife, the way they do it is they only do 3 of them a day because it's so time consuming. And they assign a nurse to you for that day. They stick with you and push you all over the hospital and stuff. And as we're leaving, you know, they introduced me to the nurse, and she, you know, we chatted for a little bit. And then she went back out and sat back out at the reception area. And as we're leaving, she says, "Okay, well, we'll see you." You know, she agreed. It was like 6 o'clock the next morning or something. I had to check in. She said, "We'll see you early tomorrow morning." I just looked at her and I said, "Okay, well, you make sure you get a good night's sleep." And she just kind of laughed, and you know, but she again, only way I could think to describe her was she was a non-practicing Muslim. She was from Pakistan. She told me her whole life story, which she was really good that day because she didn't allow me to think about what all was going on, you know. So, and she pretty much told me her whole life story, how she'd grown up in Pakistan, she'd married, and her husband came to the U.S., brought them all to the U.S. to be educated. Well, then once he was educated, he wanted to go back to Pakistan. She said, "I'm not going." She said, "I realized I wouldn't have a life in Pakistan." So she divorced him and stayed in the United States. But she was an excellent nurse and took good care of me. And we did the Gamma knife, and the doctor, after it was all done, they came in. What they do, they bolt you a frame on your head, and that's to keep your head locked in place so everything is referenced from then on. And they came in and they took the frame off, and the doctor came in and he says, "So how do you feel? Everything feel okay?" And I just for a brief second I thought about looking at him and going, "Yeah, everything's great." And I thought, no, that probably wouldn't work. I did the hospital, so I didn't do it. But 2 weeks later, well, we came home, and I got sick again while we were home with pneumonia, and put me on the, actually I had to go to the hospital. The doctors down there wanted me to go to the hospital to make sure I wasn't having some sort of brain infection or something going on. But in the McKinney Hospital for a few days, and then middle of October we went back down for the follow-up on the Gamma knife, and I was in the radiation doctor's office one afternoon, and everything was great. They said, "Everything looks great." I said, "On my way." And they actually said, "You know what, you don't need to go see the brain surgeon tomorrow morning if you don't want, because everything looks great. You know, the tumor's obviously dying, you know, so you really don't need to go see him." I said, "Well, we'll go ahead and go see him. Just follow up with him, make sure." And the next morning I go in to check in at their clinic. They take my vitals, and they're just all messed up. And running a high fever again, the heart rate's 110, blood pressure's all over the place. And so the doctor came out into the waiting room and he said, "Good news, tumor's dying, go to the emergency room." And so I went to the emergency room, and they checked me in, and that was on Friday afternoon, Friday evening, when I finally got admitted to a room. And then that Saturday, the doctor that did the in-house care came through, and he walked in and he said, "Well, I think I understand why you're getting sick." He said, "I've gone through all your CT scans and stuff. I think I understand what's happening." And he said he believed it was post-obstructive pneumonia. And he said, "But if that's it," he said, "we got to go fix it. We can't let it go." Because I was actually scheduled to start chemo the next week because the Tarceva hadn't worked. He said, "Chemo's off until we fix this. It would be a train wreck for someone in your condition to go through chemo." He says, "But we have to do a bronchoscopy on Monday morning. I've already got a scheduled. Pulmonologist will be in to see you." I said, "Okay." And he went on. Well, then Sunday afternoon he came in. He says, he said, your case has really been on my mind, and I've gone back through all your documentation. He says, we haven't tested you for this other mutation that we've just learned about within the last 5 years, and you fit the profile for it exactly. And he told us it was ELM4ALK. And he said, but it takes 8 weeks to get the results back. We have to send the tissue up to Denver for it to be tested. And I said, well, that's okay, we'll do that. And so Monday morning we did the bronchoscopy. I can remember waking up back in my hospital room and looking up, and the whole wall in front of me was nothing but lab coats. And I just thought, this is not good. And the doctors proceeded to say, yeah, we've confirmed it's post-obstructive pneumonia. We're changing your whole treatment plan. You have to start radiation, and the sooner we do it, the better. And so, okay, well, we need to do it. They said, well, you go to the Proton Therapy Center tomorrow morning. Dr. Gomez will see you. I said, what time tomorrow morning? They said, well, it opens at 10. Be there at 10. He'll see you. Okay, so we went and we met with Dr. Gomez, who, when he walked in the room, I thought Doogie Howser had walked in. The guy looked like he was straight out of high school. But he advised us that proton therapy was out of the question, that the tumor had already gotten too big for that. He recommended IMRT, intensity modulated radiation therapy. And we've got things set up to do that, and the way they have to do that is you have to go through a
simulation.
They simulate the treatments on you. They take you in, put you on the table, and what they did for me was they put this big beanbag on the table, and it had me lay down on it, get position, get everything in the position that had to be for radiation, and then they suck all the air out of it. So every time you go in, they put this thing on the bed in the same place, you lay down on it, everything's the same. And then they put 3 tattoos on me, and put a crosshair on my chest. Had a bullseye on my chest for the radiation therapy. But so we started, whenever we did the simulation, well, we'd taken the shuttle bus over from the proton therapy unit to the hospital, and while I'm sitting on the waiting bench waiting for her to come out, she'll figure what she'd gone to do, but up pulls one of the vans, the transportation vans, and out pops Dr. Gomez. And he says, well, everything go okay? I said, yeah, everything's set up. I said, I really would like to start this week. And he says, all right, we'll do everything we can to make that happen. We'll be in touch with you later this afternoon. And that afternoon they called and they said, you start tomorrow night. So it was on Thursday night. Within 3 days they had me on the table starting my radiation therapy. And I had to do 15 rounds of radiation therapy. And during that process, they managed to burn my esophagus part of down here. And I couldn't even drink water without it hurting. And we went back after a week of radiation therapy for a follow-up. And the nurse I'd had for Gamma Knife was one of the nurses on duty that day, and she came out to take me back to do my vitals. And she weighed me and did my vitals, and then she looked at me and she says, you've lost too much weight. And I said, well, I can't eat. It hurts to eat. She says, you've lost, she said what the percent was. I was down to 160 pounds. She says, you go any further, they will put a tube in. Because you've lost, you're at that percentage. You go over this percentage, they'll have to find a way to get nutrition in you. I said, well, it really hurts when I eat. She says, you have to tell the doctor, he'll prescribe a medicine. So, okay, and then I got the speech, about, you need to really focus on your protein intake. That's what we want you to do. So, that weekend we were on the way home, and we stopped at Buc-ee's there in Madisonville. And she had gone in and used the restroom, come back, and she was back in the car. And I was walking through, and I looked over, and I saw beef jerky, and it said 15 grams of protein per serving. And I thought, well, it's protein. We'll go with it. So I got a bag of beef jerky and walked over and got me an icy. And I thought, if nothing else, I could just kind of suck on the beef jerky and get the protein out of it, and that'd be okay. And we go out and I get back in the car and Glenn says, "You'll never be able to eat that." I went, "Well, we're going to find out." So what I'd do is I'd take a big suck of the icy, freeze everything, and then chomp off the big chunk of big jerky and eat it real quick. And we drove all the way from Madisonville to Dallas, and by the time we got home, I'd eaten the whole bag of beef jerky. And anyway, I couldn't find anything to drink, and somewhere along the line, I mean, they were encouraging me to drink Gatorade. The Gatorade is still hurting to drink Gatorade. And somehow, again, God works in mysterious ways. Somehow, for some reason, I started mixing 7-Up, doing a 50-50 mix of 7-Up and Gatorade. And that went down without a problem. So for a long period of time, my diet was beef jerky. They also told me to eat hard-boiled eggs. And I don't like hard-boiled eggs. But my mom always made real good deviled eggs. And my sister figured out how she did it, so I called her and said, "Okay, I need your deviled egg recipe." So she sent it to us. Elaine started making deviled eggs. So for a long time, my diet was Gatorade, 7-Up, beef jerky, and deviled eggs. And the doctor did give me some medicine, and for it is a 50-50 mix of acetaminophen and codeine. And I could take a half to 1 teaspoon, however much of it I needed, and before meals. And I figured out that if I took it and waited 30 minutes, it would work, and it would last for about 45 minutes. So for 45, those 45 minutes, anything I could get my hands on went in. And the boys started joking not to get their hands close to my plate because they'd come back with one less finger. And so that's pretty much how we lived through that time. And I got to where I couldn't find a comfortable position to sleep in during that time because my back hurt from radiation, my stomach hurt from the radiation, my right side hurt from the radiation. The only way I could sleep was on my left side. And one morning she went to work and I was laying on this couch and managed to get propped up on my left side. And I fell asleep. After she went to work, I fell asleep. And I didn't wake up until she woke me up when she came home. I went, "Oh, okay." So for about a month, I slept on the sofa, propped up against it with stomachs propped under my stomach so I wouldn't roll off and everything. And that's how I slept. And one night, I remember waking up and thought, and I just laid there, I was hurting real bad, and I just thought, "God, this isn't going right. I need something here." And I did one of these, I just said, "Okay, God, give me something." And I opened my Bible, and I'm going to cheat. I'm not going to try to open it up where it went to. But I opened up to Malachi chapter 4. "But you who fear my name, the Son of Righteousness, will rise with healing in his wings, and you will go forth and skip about like calves from the stall." Okay. There's better times coming. And finally, at about Thanksgiving time, I got to where just one morning I ate breakfast, didn't have to take the medicine, forgot to take the medicine, and then right after I was done eating breakfast, I didn't take the medicine, so I never longer needed it. So now I need to back up a couple weeks. We got through radiation, and I finished up the radiation the night before my 51st birthday. And it had only been 4 weeks since the biopsy was sent off to Denver to be tested. And on my birthday they called and said it's positive for ALK. And MD Anderson had just opened up the clinical trial for a new medicine that was showing really great promise at the time, and they wanted to know if I wanted to go into the clinical trial. I said absolutely, and they said, "Okay, well you still have to start chemo. We've got to do 3 rounds of chemo on you and still see the disease progressing before you can go into the clinical trial. But we want you to have a month off to recover from radiation before we start you on chemo." So my first chemo treatment was in the week before Christmas, and they scheduled it and I said, "Okay, this is the date we want you to start." And I said, "But my son graduates from Texas A&M the next day. I have to be able to go to that." And they said, "Don't worry, you'll be able to go. We'll fix it." And boy, did they. But I had my chemo on that Thursday. We went and saw Chad graduate Friday morning. But we picked up the message. Steve Farrar preached the message about hard times and stuff. And we had picked up that CD the week before, so we were listening to it as we drove from Houston to College Station. And we just kept laughing that Steve Farrar had followed us around for a year just to get this one message. And we saw Chad graduate, and we came home, and a month later we back and did the second round of chemo. And but in that time span, my hair had started to fall out. I decided that when the hair started to fall out, I'd get up every morning and do this. And if it came out, then I knew it was time to shave my head. Well, a week after.
It was the day after
It
Christmas.
was the day after Christmas. I got up and did this, and about that much hair came out of my head. So I told the boys, okay, I was going to let the boys shave my head. And so that night we all got together in the bathroom, and they made fun of Dad as they shaved his head. And then the next thing I know, they were going after their heads with the shaver. So they ended up with shaved heads. And but I went back and did the second round of chemo. And then when I went back for the third round, they said, well, now we see it in your liver. It's not, this chemo's not working. It's spread to we see a spot in your liver now. So we need to change it to a different medicine. And they said, but that'll fit the clinical trial. Because you have to have two different forms of intravenous chemo and still show progression. So if this doesn't work, you'll go straight into the trial. Well, they gave me that medicine. They said, well, you won't have any problem with it. You've done so well on this other medicine. You won't have any problem. That very few people have problems with this medicine.
You didn't tell them about what the percentage is for ALK.
Well, ALK at the time, the reason was when we looked it up, they said that it was 5 to 7% of all lung cancer patients would have ALK positive tumors. It's now been revised down to roughly 3%. And so they changed, they gave me the new dose of medicine, and we came home, and 10 days later I started running a fever and ended up in the hospital for 3 or 4 days with neutropenic fever. And we went back to MD Anderson a couple weeks later, and they did the scans, and they said, well, medicine did a really good job. We don't, all the tumor markers we were watching are shrinking with this new medicine. And I was like, well, what's that do with the clinical trial? And they said, well, since you had an allergic reaction to the other medicine, you automatically go into the trial. Like, okay then, that's good. So I started on that medicine. My 6-week scan, actually they had to put me through a whole other round of CT scans and everything, and they were able to find one lymph node up here on my right shoulder that they said was still lighting up. So it showed, that was their marker they were watching. 6 weeks later, I went back for the new scans and stuff. They said, okay, things are still improving. And then the week before I went back to do the 12-week scans, I'd gotten where I was riding one of my bicycles out here around the neighborhood. And I noticed one day, I was like, hey, I'm breathing better. I feel like, things are getting better. And again, that little voice popped up and says, the tumor's gone. I go back for the 12-week scan, and the doctor comes in, they said, there's no evidence of disease. All your markers are gone. We said, well, does that mean the tumor's gone? He says, well, we don't really know, but there's nothing highlighting in that area any longer. So, we'll just keep taking this medicine for as long as you can. So for the next 22 months, we went back and forth to Houston every 3 weeks until here in January we found out that cancer was coming back, and we were talking to the doctor, and the clinical trial nurse had told us in December, because at that time there were some indications that it might be coming back. She says, you need to start thinking about what you want to do. So we started doing research on